Welcome, welcome. My name is Scott Miller. I'm an LSAT instructor with Manhattan Prep. I'm based in Durham, North Carolina, and I'm going to be your instructor tonight for our November 6th free LSAT Prep Hour. So let's start off by talking about what we're doing, what we're covering. Our focus tonight is going to be on improving your score with some free and inexpensive resources. So if you're just starting out in your LSAT prep, or if you've been prepping for a while, if you've been at this for a while, and you're looking for some ways to help you increase your score, what I hope to show you tonight are some resources that you can take advantage of, and maybe to add some new tools to your prep plan. And again, these are going to be focusing on resources that are free and inexpensive. Some of these are going to be Manhattan Prep specific resources, but they're resources that are free, on our website. I'm using those because that's what I'm most familiar with. But some of these are just, they're not even specific to Manhattan Prep. They're just things you can find and use that will help you as you progress with your studies. So, maybe if you were here tonight and hoping to find, get some specific information about one of the sections, like the logical reasoning section or logic games or reading comprehension, we do these free prep hours twice a month. So, and, very often we do cover, that kind of content, specific content. We might talk about, necessary assumption questions or a specific type of logic game or the reading comprehension section. So if you're looking for that, though, if you're taking the LSAT like this month coming up and you're really looking for that kind of information, then definitely check out our YouTube channel, because we do put the recordings from these sessions on YouTube, and you can go there and we have some great just general information videos about the LSAT. Some of these feature Emily Madon, one of our LSAT instructors. I think she's still in Philadelphia. And then we have all these free prep hour recordings from previous sessions where we are covering, logical reasoning, logic games, 3D ordering. So a lot of topics on there specific to the LSAT content, to specific question types, specific game types, to reading comprehension. So if you're doing the very next LSAT and that's what you're looking for, and you came here tonight looking for that, there's a lot of good videos on our YouTube channel that you can check out from previous free prep hour sessions. And of course, we will be doing more of these sessions in the future, focusing on specific sections of the LSAT or specific question types. But again, tonight, what we're going to focus on is using some resources to accelerate your prep and to get a little bit more out of the preparing and the studying that you do. So let's start with the Law School Admission Council website. Again, a lot of people said, people who are here tonight with us live for this session said that you're just starting out or brand new to the LSAT. So this may be kind of, I don't know, maybe obvious, maybe something you've done already. If it's something you've done already, then great. Something you should do is make sure you take a really good look at the information on the LSAC website, both to be, familiar with general information that you need to know, like, how do you register and what are the fees and stuff like that, and what are the dates and deadlines. But also just they have some good information in here about how to prepare for the test. So, and especially you're going to find some information about the digital LSAT, the digital version of the test. As you probably know, if you're taking the test in North America, starting now in the second half of 2019, then you are going to be taking the test on a Microsoft Surface tablet. And it's a digital version, no more paper and pencil. So there's a lot of information that you would want to know about how to prepare for the digital LSAT, including some practice tests and tutorials. So these are what they offer are actual practice tests, 3 practice tests in the digital format. And it's really great if you actually can do this on a tablet. How many people in the chat window, for those of you who are here tonight, how many people have actually been to this page and tried out some of these digital practice tests? Give me a yes in the chat window if you have. Okay, great. Some people have. That's awesome. The way I would recommend using these, and again, if you take one of our Manhattan Prep LSAT courses, we actually assign these digital tests as homework. If you're not in a course with us, then a really good resource that I would recommend you check out is our blog, and especially this blog post, Digital LSAT Tips and Strategies and Ultimate Guide. And I'm going to put, for those of you who are here live tonight, I'm going to put a link to this specific blog post. I'll put that in the chat window at the end of the session so you can go check that out. If you're watching the recording on YouTube, then you can go to our Manhattan Prep website, go to our blog, our LSAT blog, and you can find this article pretty easily. But this gives you a really good rundown on the digital test, how it works, and suggestions from our instructors about strategies and recommendations and how to most effectively take the test in this digital format. So what might be a good thing to do would be to read through this ultimate guide, and then what I suggest you do is start with one of these practice tests and just go through each section. Don't worry about time or anything. There will be a timer running, but just explore a little bit, and using the information in the blog post, just get used to how the digital interface works. Not even worrying about whether you're answering questions correctly or anything like that, but get used to the annotation tools. Get used to the different views and how things look. Get used to how you can mark answers as eliminated or mark answers as correct. The annotation tools are pretty limited. The only things you can do are underline text or highlight text. You can't do any like freehand animations. So all of your logic game diagrams, any notes you're going to take would be on scrap paper. You do get scrap paper for every section. They give you a pretty generous amount of scrap paper. But again, if you use our blog post and take a good look at this blog post, and then just use the first practice test to look at each section, play around a bit, experiment a little bit. Don't worry about even answering questions correctly or not. Just get used to the digital LSAT format and the different screens and the different tools, and get used to how all that works. And then you can use another practice test and actually do an individual section under time conditions, and practice using these tools and using this digital format test under time conditions. There are a few limitations to be aware of with these prep tests. So LSAC has been, improving these all year since they first published these, the first digital test that they had available. One thing to be aware of is there is a timer running, and you will get a message. You'll get a 5-minute warning, and you'll get a message when the section's done, but it won't automatically advance you to the next section. So it's not, totally realistic in that way. You have to, click over to the next section yourself. So again, these may be a little more useful maybe for just practicing individual sections rather than, practicing a full test, but you can make that decision. And I think if anybody has any specific questions about the digital test, we can, I'll try to save some time at the end for us to talk about that specifically. But again, just tonight, the main idea here, the main point is to make sure that you've looked at the LSAC website and that you're really familiar with all of those digital resources, or all those resources that are available on their website, including information about the digital LSAT and how it works. There's several pages of information about that you want to be familiar with. So even though the LSAT has gone digital, you still will want to practice with paper prep tests, because there are like 90 of them out there, right? Like there are a lot of these digital tests, actually administered LSATs, that have been published by LSAC. You can go out and buy these books of prep tests. And the one thing is, even if you're using predominantly free resources, you're trying to save money, I would recommend you go buy at least 1 or 2 of these prep test books of previous prep tests. You're going to want to use these previous prep tests both to practice with individual sections and learn about the different question types. And you'll also want to sit down and do full timed practice tests. You need to do a certain number of those to really get proficient with what you're going to have to do on test day. We recommend doing somewhere between 6 and 14 full timed practice tests under actual conditions. And you can go to our website and find a lot of good information about taking a practice test. Again, at the end of the session tonight, I'll put a link in the chat window with a link to the free resources page on our website, and that includes a bunch of information about taking practice tests. For those of you who are watching the recording, if you go to the information about the recording, the information, like if you're in a web browser, you go to the information below the video. You'll see links to the free resources on our website where you can find everything you want to know about taking a practice test. So again, even if you're trying to keep costs down, I would definitely recommend buying one or two of these books of paper prep tests. You just need to use those tests to get familiar with what it's like to take a full-time practice test, sit there for 2.5 hours and do one section after another. Now we'll talk a little bit about how to use these paper tests, because again, you might be thinking, well, why am I going to use paper tests to practice for a digital test? But actually, part of the reason is because there are so many of these out there. There's so many of these to use to practice. Basic guideline for using a paper test to practice is once you take a little time to be familiar with the digital LSAT and how it works, make sure when you're doing a paper test that you only make the marks in the test booklet that you could actually make on the screen. So when you're working on a question in the test booklet, you can underline, you can highlight, you can mark a question as eliminated or select the question that's your correct answer. Everything else you should be doing on scrap paper. So really get used to using scrap paper extensively while you're taking practice tests. If you want to be a little nicer to the planet, instead of using piles and piles and piles of scrap paper, you can get one of these, get a whiteboard, a little cheap whiteboard, and that gives you a reusable surface to write on when you're practicing. But even if you do that, make sure you do a little bit of practice with scrap paper too, so you get familiar with that. Let me pause here for a second. Does anybody have any questions? Anybody who is here with us tonight live? If you have a question, you can either type your question in the chat window, or if you want to get on the microphone, let me go ahead and do this for those who are here tonight. I will make it so that you can raise your hand if you want to get on the microphone. If you raise your hand, there should be now, if you hover your mouse down near the bottom of the screen, there's a little raise hand button. And I'll be able to see that if you raise your hand, if you want to get on the microphone. Okay, so no questions. I don't see anybody raising their hand. I don't see any questions in the chat window, so let's keep rolling. So let's talk a little bit about some free or low-cost phone apps that can help you prepare for the LSAT. One thing I'm going to say about using your phone is if you're going to use your phone to practice while you're practicing on the LSAT, you're going to use your phone as a timer, let's say. And that's mainly what we're going to be talking about, is how to use your phone as a timer, and a couple different types of timers that you can use while you're practicing. Make sure your phone is in airplane mode. Make sure to, however you do it. And again, I'm using an iPhone as an example, an iOS. If you have an Android phone or another type of phone, then you should be able to figure out how to do the same thing. But you want to make sure that you switch your phone over to airplane mode. I used to tell people, not to even use their phone, like turn your phone off, put it in another room, because you don't want distractions. Obviously, if you're sitting down and doing a practice test, you don't want distractions while you're doing a practice test. You don't want, you can say, I'll just ignore any, text messages I get or notifications or anything. You can say that, but in practice, it's hard to do, even though like a couple seconds of a distraction is still a distraction. So that's one reason why you would want to either turn your phone off or put your phone in airplane mode. The reason I'm talking about putting your phone in airplane mode is because you don't want to have the phone off to do what I'm about to show you. You're going to have your phone turned on. But if it's in airplane mode, then you're not going to get any incoming text messages or email notifications or anything like that, or calls, if anybody gets any calls these days. So why is this so important? Like, obviously, yeah, one possibility is you just don't want to be distracted while you're practicing or while you're taking a practice test. But there's actually another reason why it's really important to either have your phone turned off, or if you're going to use your phone the way I'm going to show you in a minute, use some timers. Make sure that you're not getting any messages or notifications. Turn reminders off and stuff like that. Why is that so important? Any ideas in the chat window other than avoiding distractions? So one of the, actual test requires that you be fully focused. Maftuna, that is an awesome answer. That is exactly it. So one of the biggest complaints that I hear from people is that they have a hard time like maintaining their concentration, even maybe all the way through one section. And then by the time you've done 3 sections or 4 sections, it can be really hard to keep your concentration. So you want to train yourself to concentrate. You want to train yourself to stay 100% focused on this test for 35 minutes, time after time after time. And, if you've got text messages coming in and notifications and you're glancing at your phone, oh, who's that? You're training yourself to be distracted, to pay attention to distractions. And that's a big problem with this, wonderful technology that we have, is we allow ourselves to get trained to be distracted. So that's why we want to put the plan in it. If you're going to use your phone the way I'm about to show you, or use your phone for any reason as a timer while you're practicing for the LSAT, make sure it's in airplane mode while you're practicing. Okay. So with that being said, let's talk about a couple of ways to actually use your phone. And again, we're going to focus on some free or low-cost phone apps. So one is a timer. And the one I'm going to show you as an example is called Timer Plus. You can get it in the App Store if you have an iPhone. And the way this works, the way I use this is, and Timer Plus is not the only app that'll do this. It just happens to be the one that I have on my phone, so I'm using it as an example. But you can create, you've probably seen, apps like this. They allow you to create a timer and name it and set like a set amount of time. And then you click start and you get a nice countdown. So this is going to count down from 35 minutes, and it'll ring a little alarm and give you a little message when time is up. So this is a way to time your section. And so this by itself, works really well, especially, again, if you're taking the digital test, you're going to have a little countdown timer up in the corner, up in the right-hand corner. So having your phone sitting next to, your test booklet while you're working, while you're practicing, and having that countdown works really well to simulate that timer on the digital test. But if you want to be, so that's good enough, right? That's kind of all you need. But if you want to be really realistic, it's kind of nice to have a 5-minute warning as an additional, bonus, because that's something that you're going to have on the real test. And if you want to simulate that, and that can be an important part of your timing. Some people really like to know when that 5 minutes is up, or sorry, when a lot of people like to really know when they're down to that last 5 minutes. Right? When you're getting that 5-minute warning. So it would be nice to have some kind of app that simulates that. Well, again, you don't need, any kind of fancy LSAT specific app. If you have one of these timer apps that lets you create timers and name them and set a specific amount of time for the countdown, you notice here I have one that is the 35 minutes, the full section. And then I have another one here called 5-minute warning. It's only 30 minutes. So if I was going to sit down and do a section, or even if I was doing a full-time test, what I could do is have this up on my phone. And then when I'm ready to start the section, when I'm ready to begin, I'm going to start both of these at the same time. So now I have these 2 timers, counting down. One's counting down from 35 minutes and one's counting down from 30 minutes. And I'm going to kind of ignore the 5-minute warning one. If I want to look and see how much time I have left, I'm just looking at the top one. But what this allows me to do, if we kind of jump forward in time a little bit to see how this works. So let's say we're getting down close to 5 minutes remaining. So if we were to look at the timer, again, jump ahead in time, you see that the full section timer still says 5 minutes and 6 seconds. The 5-minute warning says 3 seconds left. And then when that 5-minute warning timer is up, I'm going to get a little bell and a little message saying the 5-minute warning is done. I hit my reset button, and then I just have the full section timer left. So again, using a timer app like this, with and then creating 2 timers, one for the full section and one the full section one that counts down from 35 minutes, and then another timer that just counts down from 30 minutes, gives you that realistic 5-minute warning if you want that. You don't have to do that, but it's kind of nice to have it be realistic. Also, if you notice the way this was set up with this particular app, when you get that 5-minute warning, the message comes up on the screen, and just like on the real digital LSAT, you're going to have to click an OK button to acknowledge that you saw the 5-minute warning. The 5-minute warning on the digital LSAT is kind of obnoxious. It like pops up in the middle of the screen, says 5-minute warning, and you have this little button you have to click to close it. So this kind of simulates that as well when that 30-minute timer is up. So again, this is just a way of using a timer app, low cost or free timer app on your phone to as a very realistic LSAT countdown timer, just like you're going to have on the digital test. So you can have that and get used to having that there when you are working on a practice test. Antoine says, when did I take the LSAT? When was it? 2013 is when I took the LSAT, the actual LSAT. So have I taken a digital one? I have not taken the actual digital LSAT yet because there have only been a couple of them, right? They only started in July. So I have not actually sat for a digital LSAT. I have thoroughly used and explored the resources on LSAC's website. I helped develop training for our instructors for the digital LSAT. And I gotten a lot of feedback from my students about the digital LSAT as well. Does that answer your question, Antoine? Let me know if you have any other questions about that. Okay, so, Ariel, another question. You notice I have an LG timer for 1 minute, 20 seconds. Is that the amount of time you should take per question? So the LR timer for 1 minute and 20 seconds that's kind of the average amount of time that you have for an LR question. If you think that you have 35 minutes per section, you have on average around 25 questions in an LR section. That works out to about 1 minute and 20, minute 30 per question. So yeah, I've used that in the past, right? To when I'm working on one individual question at a time, I'll sometimes use that timer to, time myself and get used to that 1 minute and 20-second interval so that I know what that feels like to be working for that amount of time on a single question. Just like you can have a timer. That's why these timer apps are kind of nice, because you can create different timers for different things. You could have an 8 minute and 45-second timer for a logic game or a reading comprehension passage. That you can get used to that time interval as well. All right, great. Good questions. So keep them coming if you have any more questions. All right, let's keep going with another resource that you may find useful. So what we'll talk about next is a lap timer. And this may be something that you're familiar with, something you've seen before, something you've used before, but I'd like to show you how to use a lap timer to improve your timing on different sections. So what I'm going to show you, I'm going to show you this in reading comprehension just as an example. We'll use RC as an example, but you can apply this same idea to any section of the test. So let's see how this works. And Antoine, I saw your question. What I'm going to say about that is I'm going to admit that I am most familiar with Manhattan Prep's resources. And I recommend our resources. I recommend our classes, private tutoring, or even our free resources are really helpful. As far as other resources, I've looked at them a little bit. If some of them don't cost anything, and that's a big advantage, right? If you really don't have a lot of money to invest in preparing for the test, and there are free resources available, I would suggest you use them. In terms of other resources, like if you're thinking about taking a course, like if you're thinking about taking an LSAT course, definitely do your homework and look into the different courses that are available. So one of the things that Manhattan Prep does is we offer free trial classes where you can attend session 1 of any of our courses for free, so that you get an idea of what our courses are like, what we're teaching, what our instructors are like. And that's a really good way to see for yourself, right? So you can ask, hey, is this a good resource or is that a good resource? And probably what I'm mostly going to say is check it out yourself. I mean, if it's a free resource that's available, or if they have like samples that you can check out, just like our LSAT Interact course. We have an LSAT Interact course that's a self-study course. And you can check out, I think, one of our LSAT Interact sessions for free. So yeah, you can check out our free resources. You can, come to one of our class sessions for free, and then, take a look at some of these other resources that are available and check them out and see what works the best for you. Because that's sometimes what it comes down to is you've got to consider, your budget. You've got to consider the amount of time that you have to prep, the amount of score increase that you're going for, right? If you're looking for a pretty big increase in your score, or you're really shooting for a top score, you're looking for a score in the high 160s or 170s, then, that may require, depending on how big of an increase you're looking for, that may require you to invest some money. The higher your score is, the higher LSAT score you have, that can translate into, some financial assistance or financial advantage as you go through law school. So that's something to think about too. But there are a lot of good resources out there that you can check out, and you can at least, try them for free. So I suggest you do that and see which ones work the best for you. Okay, so let's talk about this lap timer that I was going to show you guys. And again, I'm going to use an logical reasoning section. Sorry, I'm going to use a reading comprehension section as an example. But what I'm about to show you will really work with any section. All right, so let's pretend you're looking at your desk here and you have a paper test or test book open to a reading comprehension section. Now, if this is really hard to read, if you can't really read the text here, that's good, because I don't want you reading the text. This is the June 2007 test, which you can download for free. It's the reading comprehension section, and it's passage 3. So if you're really interested in this passage and the questions, wait until after we're done here, and then go download the June 2007 test. There's a link on our website you can use to download it, or you can get it directly from the LSAC site, and you can go look at this passage and the questions later. For now, I want you to think about big picture, and I want you to think about how to use the stopwatch tool, which, again, if you're using an iPhone, it's one of the features of the clock app, right? Built right in for free. You already have it on your phone. If you're using an Android phone, you probably have the same thing or something similar. So what I'm going to show you is how to use a lap timer to get a better idea of how long you're spending on specific parts of a section, or let's say like a reading comprehension passage. You're going to read a reading comprehension passage and answer the questions. This is a good way to see how long you're spending on different questions. So the way this works is let's say you're getting ready to work on this reading comprehension passage and answer the questions. So just before you start reading the passage, you go ahead and click the start button and start the timer. And then timer starts. So then you start reading the passage, right? And you just ignore the timer while you're reading. So again, this is the way your desk is set up, right? You have your test booklet here, you have your iPad or your iPhone or your whatever phone right here with the stopwatch running. So we're going to go ahead and jump ahead in time a little bit. And let's say you're just about to finish reading the passage. And so let's say it takes you about 2 minutes and 55 seconds to read the entire passage. So what you're going to do as you finish reading the passage, you're going to click this lap button, not the stop button, the lap button. So you're going to click the lap button. And what happens when you click that lap button is you notice that you have lap 1 here showing what the timer was reading when you press the lap button. So that's showing you what the time that had elapsed when you finish reading the passage. And now we're working on this first question, right? This question 15. So the timer's still running. And I'm working on question 15. And when I finish question 15, I'm going to go ahead and hit the lap button again. And that's going to show me how long it took me to finish question 15. So what I'm going to do is just, go through every question. And when I finish the question, I'm going to tap on that lap button. And the trick of this is that you have to remember to click, tap the lap button every time that you finish a question. And that may take a little bit of practice to remember to do that. But so the idea here is, you see what you're ending up with. You're ending up with a running log of how long it's taking you to read the passage, and then how long it's taking you to answer each question. And this works really well with a logic game. After you finish your diagram and you're set up for the logic game, you click lap. And that shows you how long the setup took. And then you answer the first question, you click lap. You answer the second question, you click lap. And you just keep pressing the lap button or tapping the lap button on your phone every time you answer a question. So again, we're going to go ahead and fast forward time a little bit here. And let's say we're getting towards the end and you're working on the last question in the section. Or not in the section, the last question in this particular passage. So I'm working on question 22 here. And I get to the end and I can't answer question 22, and that's when I'm going to hit stop. So as soon as I'm done, I hit stop. And what I end up with is this nice little list of all of these elapsed times that it's taken me to answer each question. And I can scroll through that list and look at the amount of time it took me to read the passage, the amount of time it's taking me to answer each question. So I can just kind of ignore the times really while I'm working. I don't have to worry about how long anything's taken. In fact, I would suggest that you kind of consciously try to ignore the timer. All you have to do is think about hitting lap every time you finish something. Hit start, hit lap every time you finish something, and then hit stop at the end. And so what you'll end up with when you're done is this nice kind of elapsed list of times that you can look through. So I'm going to put this up on the screen. I'm going to kind of put the whole list up here. And I want everybody to take a look at this list of times and tell me what you notice. In the chat window, tell me if you notice anything interesting in this list of times. Lost time in the beginning. So what do you mean by lost time in the beginning? How so? How did I lose time in the beginning? Yeah, Roots is saying shorter and longer times. So remember that first time, lap one, is just, that's showing me how long it took me to read the passage. So I started the timer, and when I finished reading the passage, I pressed the lap button for the first time. And that's so the 2 minutes and 55 seconds to read the passage is not bad. For a lot of people, that would be a really respectable time. If you're anywhere around 3 minutes to 3.5 minutes to read the passage, that's totally fine. Less than that is great. Longer than that is not necessarily bad either, and especially on some more difficult passages, if you're taking closer to 4 minutes, that's not necessarily unexpected. Something to remember about reading comprehension is, whatever your normal reading speed is, some passages are going to take you a little bit longer to read than others. So yeah, but no, it's a good question though, Antoine, because a lot of people have that question, like, how long should I take to read a passage? Like, what's the normal average reading time? Okay, so somebody said longer and shorter times. Yeah, so if we start getting into the actual question times, notice I have this one, so I've got 43 seconds, 32 seconds, 38 seconds. I mean, that's a pretty respectable amount of time to finish a question. It's pretty reasonable. But then I have this one, which is 1 minute and 33 seconds. So I spent almost a minute and a half on this one question. So this is question 1, question 2, question 3, question 4. So the fourth question is one that took me 1 minute and 33 seconds. And this is the real advantage of the lap timer, because I've done this before, right? Just to practice. I've done this with logic games. I've done this with reading comprehension sections. And it's been surprising sometimes to find out, like, I might have a little bit of a sense that I'm taking a little bit of extra time to answer a question, but sometimes I'm really surprised when I use the lap timer at how long I actually spend answering certain questions. So that's good information to know. You can go back and take a look at that fourth question and say, why did I take so long? Where did I get stuck in the mud here? What allowed me to, how did I allow myself to spend that much time on one question? Because that's something that you really want to avoid. I mean, you may make a conscious decision to spend that much time on a question, but it should be a conscious decision. How about lap 7 there? You notice that 10-second one? What do you think that means? So this one over here where we answered in 10 seconds. What do you all think that was? What's that all about? You just like nail the question, answer it really quickly? What do you think that's all about? Somebody tell me in the chat window. Miriam, exactly right. Guess, yeah, skipped it. Right? So this is another thing. If you're going to use this method, this lap timer, if you decide to skip a question, you always guess. If you're going to skip a question, you always guess. And just pick your favorite guess letter and always pick the same letter. It's a good thing to do. But yeah, so maybe for this question, I just read the question stem here and went, wow, that's really confusing. I'm going to skip this question. So I click my lap, and that just shows up as a really short amount of time that I spent on this question, which is great because I only spent 10 seconds on this question, which means I had much more time to spend on the last two. I mean, imagine if I looked at this and said, wow, that's a really hard question, decided to stick with it anyway. Based on what I see myself doing here, I could have potentially spent the entire rest of my time, my 8 minutes and 45 seconds or so that I planned to spend on this set. I could have spent that entire time just answering one question. Instead, I got, guessed on this one, and I got 2 more completed in that time. So this is the whole real value of the lap timer. It's a really, again, just about every phone has one of these built in, and you can use this, using this method to really get a good analysis of how much time you spend reading the passage and then how much time are you spending on each question, and make decisions about why, was that time well spent. I might not necessarily mind spending a minute and a half, a little bit longer on a question, but I wouldn't want to do that until the end. I really wouldn't want to do that until I answered all the other questions and and saw that I had some time left. And then I might take, if I have some extra time, I might take the extra time to answer a more lengthy question. But again, it should be a conscious decision, not just, surprise, I took a minute and a half to answer this question. I really don't plan on taking that long. All right, so any questions about these resources? How to use these timers, and what do y'all think about this? Does anybody think this might be something that you want to try? The using the timer app with the creating a 35-minute countdown and a 30-minute, so you get the 5-minute warning. Ariel says 100%. Maybe using the lap timer. I really like the lap timer. It really ends up being a useful tool. You can do an entire LR section, 25 questions. I mean, it's a little, you got to look through 25 entries here to see what your times are. But yeah, Antoine, you're already using it. Awesome. Excellent. So yeah, you can end up learning some really useful things and get some really useful feedback about how much time you're spending on each question. All right, so let's look at some other tools that you may want to use that may end up being useful as you're going through your prep. So another tool that I recommend that is really, that I think you'll find really useful. Again, you might already be using this, and if you already are already using this, then fantastic. But if not, I really recommend that you use our Manhattan Prep LSAT Navigator. So again, this is a free tool. I think you have to create an account on our website to use it, but it's a completely free tool. And what it allows you to do is get an analysis of any full-time practice tests that you take. So, and I would recommend that you use the LSAT Navigator for any time you sit down and do a full practice test. Some people even use it if they do just like an individual timed section, but this is really best. It's really best to use for timed work, although, realistically you can use it any way you want. So I'm going to show you a little bit about the Navigator and how it works. Let's see. So, one second here. All right, here we go. So when you look at the Navigator screen, and again, you might have to create an account on our website in order to access the Navigator, but it's free. That's all you have to do. What the Navigator does is allows you to enter your answers from a practice test. So you take a full practice test, you have your answers, and then you basically select the test in this score a test screen. You select whichever prep test it was that you used. And this is going to take you to a screen where you enter all of your answers. And then you can go to this review a test screen, or this review a test box, and select one of the tests that you've answered to get a detailed analysis. You also get this nice little graph showing you your progress. So here's somebody who's taken 4 practice tests and they're getting a little bit of increase. Not really unusual that I know a lot of people want to see like really huge increases every practice test. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. It's actually pretty normal to see, this is one of the reasons why we recommend taking 6 to 12, 14 full-time practice tests, because if you just take a few, you might not really see a big change in your score. It takes a little bit of repetition and practice to see an increase. One of the things you'll get if you go down to the bottom of the Navigator screen is you get this breakdown of your performance. It gives you some information about your performance, and this is basically just based on percentages correct. There's no like advanced AI. This is not like Watson at IBM that's analyzing your performance and giving you this information. It's a pretty basic algorithm that gives you this information, but you may find that it's useful. So you can check that out and decide for yourself how useful that's going to be. So once you've entered a test in the Navigator, like I said, you can examine it. You can go to that specific test and review that specific test and get a detailed breakdown. And this is where I think the Navigator is most useful. This is where, what I actually recommend that my students do with the Navigator. Not so much worry about the general analysis at the bottom of the home page that I just showed you, but I recommend going into each of these practice tests and using the detailed analysis that they show you. So you'll see your overall score. And then they give you these kind of like estimated LSAT scores for each section. I don't really worry too much about those. Sometimes it's nice to do a quick glance. But what's really useful to look at in the Navigator is the number correct, and see how that changes from test to test. That gives you really, really detailed information. So Antoine, if you are a Manhattan Prep student, if you're a course student, if you're taking one of our online courses, or if you're a tutoring student, you do get access to every released, published LSAT. We have them all as PDFs on our website. You also get 2 of the prep test books of 10 practice tests. So you have those already on paper to use. In terms of other than that, LSAC, the practice tests are copyrighted. So if you're not like one of our students, I know the ways that you can get practice tests are by, you can buy the prep test books, or there are a few available on the LSAC website. But in order to get access to all the practice tests that we have available on our website, you do have to be a registered student with us. So that's the answer to your question, Antoine. Okay, so let's talk about the detailed analysis here. So again, I would look, pay attention to the number correct in each section, the number correct that you're getting in each section type. That tends to give you the most, the most important information that you want to see up here in the summary. And then if you go to each section, you can see the percentage correct, which can be useful to know, the number correct out of the total number. And then you'll see a breakdown of the which questions you answered correctly and which ones you got wrong. And you can even look at focused views to see specifically just the ones you answered incorrectly or just the ones that you answered correctly. While you're entering your answers in the Navigator, you can also flag questions for review, or you can use this little timer icon to show questions that where you ran out of time and just guessed. So the question type, this corresponds to our language, our terminology. If you're studying with somebody else's books or resources, then they might use slightly different language. But if you're familiar with our terminology, then you'll see the question type here. The difficulty level is based on people taking practice tests and entering their answers in the Navigator, and us seeing, and so the Navigator calculates the difficulty level based on how many people answered that question correctly. You can also, for any question, click the little plus icon, and you'll see percentages for, what percentage of people selected that particular answer. So there's a little bit of, science, a little bit of black magic here, a little bit of voodoo. I don't necessarily always agree with the difficulty levels that show up in the Navigator. I've seen some that, show up as very easy that I thought were kind of difficult. I'm kind of surprised that a large percentage of people got it right. Others that the Navigator lists as difficult are, in my opinion, not that hard. And some of it is relative. A question that's difficult for some people will not be necessarily super difficult for others. But again, you get this information, you can see the percentages, how many people selected each question, each answer choice. And that can be really useful in some cases, like, let's say, for example, let me see if I can find a good one. Okay, so this is a good example. So here, the correct answer was C to this question, and 73% of people selected C, but out of all the other answers, the one that this person selected, answer choice A, which is an incorrect answer, 21% of the people, so most people who answered incorrectly chose that answer choice A. So, like, what does that tell you? If you chose an answer that's not correct, but you're seeing that, so did a lot of other people. A lot of other people who got this wrong chose that same wrong answer. What does that tell you? Does that give you any useful information? Let's see some of these other ones. Anybody have any ideas in the chat window? So here's another one. Only 56%, just a little bit over half of the people who answered this question selected the correct answer. 24%, almost a quarter of people chose answer choice D, which is incorrect. So what that might show you is that that's a really good trap answer. That is a very, very appealing incorrect answer. You might already know that from, you're reviewing the test, but that can kind of confirm that, yeah, it's not just me. Like, that is actually a really good, appealing incorrect answer. And it would be really valuable probably to know exactly why that answer is incorrect. Why is it wrong? And why is it so appealing? It's a really good thing, especially if you answer questions incorrectly. Some of the most valuable things that you can figure out is, are why is the wrong answer wrong, and what makes it appealing? What made it look good? Why is the correct answer correct, and why did it not look appealing? Right? Why didn't you choose it? What makes it look wrong? So you can get a lot of useful information that informs your review and helps you do a more effective review by entering these questions in the Navigator and then looking at the information. You'll also get information, so for example, about the type of question. And again, this is all based on our terminology, but you will get some information about the type of question that it is. And the same thing applies, so if you go to the logic game section, you can, look at individual games and see the type of game it is. For different questions, you get information about the exact question type. And again, you can see percentages of, what percentage of people chose certain answers. So kind of compare your performance against the general population of people who entered that particular test in the Navigator. Another thing that can be really useful in the Navigator is we have links right here. You can click on one of these links and that'll take you directly to our LSAT forum. So if there's an explanation for a particular question on our forums, these links in the Navigator will take you directly there. So again, Navigator, it's a free resource. I think you do have to sign up for an account on our website, but that's all you got to do is sign up for a free account. And then you have access to this LSAT Navigator where you can enter practice tests after you have completed them and get a really detailed analysis. Now, one thing I'll say is if you were with us a couple weeks ago, I did a free prep hour on, I think it was October 14th, where I talked about reviewing and how to review your work. I spent like the first 20 minutes going through a detailed explanation of how to do a blind review. And what I'm going to suggest is, I'm not sure if that's up on our YouTube channel yet, but it should be soon. You know, when you take a practice test, the first thing that you do, the first thing everybody wants to do is check their answers, right? And see how many you got correct. But that's not necessarily what you want to do. It's a really good idea to go back and review the test before you ever check answers. So entering tests in the Navigator and entering your answers in the Navigator shouldn't necessarily be like the thing that you do immediately after taking a practice test. You should be marking questions while you're working, questions that you find difficult, questions that you guess on, and then go back and review those questions that you marked, as many of them as you have time to do, and really take your time and review those before you ever check answers, because that's a really great way to you know, catch yourself, catch your own mistakes, or to understand questions better that gave you trouble. And you'll understand them a lot more better. You'll be a lot more motivated to pick them apart and try to understand them if you don't know what the correct answer is yet. So a really good review, a really good process would be you take a practice test or, you know, do a section under time conditions, review it before you check answers, then enter it in the Navigator. And that will tell you which ones you got correct and which ones you answered incorrectly. And then you may find that there are a few that you haven't reviewed yet that were incorrect that, you know, you still want to check out and review. Cool. Anybody have any questions about the Navigator? How many people, I'm just curious, how many people here have used the LSAT Navigator on our website and already maybe knew some of this stuff? Hopefully, if you have used it, you already know some of this stuff. Hopefully, you maybe saw a few things that are new and a few things you might want to check out, or, you know, next time you use it. Okay, so let's do one more thing. We have a few minutes left, and I want to switch over to one topic because if you are attending live tonight, then you probably got an email telling you about a survey. So we have like a questionnaire you can fill out before you attend the free prep hour session, and where you can ask questions. And our instructors always check those as we're planning the session. And I try to answer, you know, depending on how many questions there are and what the questions are, I try to answer as many of those as I can. But I just want to spend a minute or so talking about one question that somebody asked tonight, which is, what techniques can I use to optimize my time and answer more questions correctly within the allotted time? So this is a really good question. And, you know, there are very specific answers that depend on the question type. There are more general answers that are applicable to the LSAT in general. I'm going to tell you, you know, one thing that some people think when you see a question like this is work faster. That's what a lot of people kind of set as their goal as they're preparing for the test. You know, a lot of people come to our courses or, you know, come to these free prep hours, and that's really what they're looking for. They're looking to learn how to work faster. Does anybody see a potential problem with working faster? All right, Naftuni, you say yes. So what's a potential problem with working faster? You make more mistakes. Yeah, exactly, right? And this is a trap that a lot of people fall into because it's a tough test, right? The timing conditions on the LSAT are tough. And what it ends up doing is it makes a lot of people, you get this idea in your head that you have to work as fast as possible. And it's not the case at all. People who do really well in this test, know when to go fast and know when to slow down. So, you know, there are some times when to slow down, like when something's difficult or something's confusing, slow down a little bit. Sometimes that's all you need. You know, you're looking at an answer choice and it's worded in a really confusing way. Some people will sit there and read it 4 or 5 times really fast, or 6 times really fast, or 10 times really fast, right? Well, that takes time. why not slow down and read it one more time a little more carefully? So look for opportunities to do that. Try to notice as you're taking the test, times when you really feel rushed or times when you're starting to feel a little pressured and overwhelmed. And take a breath and slow down a little bit. Because really what the question is, if we were to reword this question a little bit, a good question to ask yourself really is, how can I spend every moment doing something that will increase my score? And this actually ties into something we talked about earlier. When I was talking about using the lap timer and how I approached that, the lap times in that lap timer and the lap times that we saw, and I was asking you if anybody saw anything interesting about those times. There's actually a really important tip in there, or some really important advice that can help you answer this question. And it's counterintuitive. A lot of people don't really, it's not the first thing that a lot of people think of when they think about increasing their score. But what we talked about was skipping and guessing. So this is just, one more thought. So, a couple things that I'll mention, a couple specific things that can actually are kind of counterintuitive, but can help you increase your score. And one is learn when to slow down. And when you can go fast. And then learn how to effectively skip, how to effectively guess. One of the things that you want to do is notice, one of the things that the lap timer is really valuable for is to notice when you're spending a lot of time on a question. And then maybe go back and look at that question again and you'll go, oh yeah, I kind of felt like I was spending a lot of time on that. And then, learn to trust your instinct. It's really nice if you develop your own internal timer. You get a sense for, like we were talking about earlier with LR questions, trying to set a timer for 1:20 when you're working on an LR question and get used to what that time interval feels like, because you'll start to develop a sense when you've really spent a lot of time on a question. And when you get to that point, often the best thing to do, the smartest thing to do is guess and move on. There may be certain question types that you just guess on right away, or like that, that 1 10-second interval. It might be a question type that you just know you almost never get correct. And so it may be a smart move to go ahead and skip that question. I mean, if it takes you 10 seconds to decide that you're going to guess on a question, if it only takes you 10 seconds to make that decision, then all the rest of the time that you would have spent on that question, you can spend on other questions. You can dedicate that time, invest that time in other questions, and maybe have a better chance of getting those questions correct. And this is a really hard thing to do, right? This is a really hard thing to do. Skipping and guessing, I find often, is one of the hardest things to convince, my students that it's something they should do. How many people feel like your job on the LSAT is to answer every question correctly? That might seem like a little bit of a weird question, but ask it again. Is your job Okay, I have a no in the chat window. What do y'all think? Yes, no? Yeah, I mean, no is a really good answer. And it's the every here that's the problem. Yeah, exactly. It's about strategy. Good answer in the chat window. It's about strategy. So part of the strategy is thinking about, like, what's your goal score? What score do you want to achieve to get into the law school that you want to attend? It's nice to get a 180, but for most people, that's not necessary at all. A perfect score is not necessary at all. So and there's actually a really good resource that you can use to figure this out, other than knowing what your goal score is, like doing some research on the law school that you want to attend and figuring out what's the score that I need to get into that law school. You can also use the score conversion charts, and these are from, you can find these in the back of any LSAT practice test, any LSAT prep test. And, in any of the prep test books or download the June 2000, this is from the June 2007 LSAT, which you can download for free. And this shows you the reported score, your 120 to 180 score, and the actual number of questions, lowest and highest number of questions that will allow you to get that score. And yeah, this does vary a little bit from test to test, but really you can look at any one and get an idea. So for example, let's say that you took a practice test and you got a 150. So you might be thinking, man, I really want to get a 165 to get into whatever law school. I really want to get a 170. And that's great. But if on your last practice test, your last full-time practice test, your score was a 150, then it's really not productive to be thinking right away about that 170 or 165 or whatever you want to get. You want to think about getting a few more points, right? When I take another practice test, what would be a score that would be a step up from what I got last time? So maybe it would be a 155, maybe a 153, right? Maybe just a few more points. But if you think about it, maybe, if you're thinking about trying to get a 155, so you can get a 155 with 70 correct, which is about 30 incorrect, which is about 7 incorrect per section. So there are 7 questions in every section on average, an average of 7 questions per section or so, that you can get incorrect and still get a 155, still get a score that should make you happy. If you're, shooting up a little higher, maybe you're shooting for a 161 on your next practice test. You got a 159 last time. You'd like to be up in the high 160s or a 170. But for your very next practice test, think about a 161. So that's, 80 correct, which is still 5 wrong per section. So this can be a really productive way to think about your strategy. Not, I have to get every question correct, but how many questions do I have to get correct to get the score that I want? And how much leeway does that leave me? Like, how many questions can I actually get wrong in every section and still get that? And what that should do, hopefully, is help you feel a lot more comfortable about skipping questions. Because, if I can get 5 wrong per section and still get a score that I'm really happy with, I should be happy skipping 2 or 3 or maybe 4 or 5. Guess on those and spend the time, spend the effort trying to get the other ones correct. So the LSAT is all about, like somebody said, it's about strategy, right? Like Matuna said in the chat window, it's all about strategy. And it's about using your time wisely, thinking about how you're going to invest your time and what is going to help you spend every moment doing something that's going to help you increase your score. And that is probably not, unless you're already scoring in the 170s and trying to push your score up even higher, generally you're not spending your time wisely by spending time on the most difficult questions in the test. All right, folks. I see one more question in the chat window. If I'm skipping a reading comp question, do I go back and try to answer that question before moving on to the next passage, or just skip it altogether? That depends on how much time you have left, and that's why it's nice to use a timer, a countdown timer, 35-minute countdown timer, because if you think about it, if you're thinking about, like, on average 8 minutes and 45 seconds per passage set, so if you're trying to be done with, like, you're trying to be done with passage 1 with about 26 minutes left. You try to be done with passage 2 with about 17 minutes left. You're trying to be done with passage 3 with about 8 minutes left. So if you just remember those 3 numbers, 26, 17, and 8, that's the amount of time you want to have left as you finish the first passage, second passage, third passage. Same thing with games, right? First game, second game, third game. So what I'm going to do is I am very happy often to skip a couple questions in an RC section or in the logic game. But what I'm going to do when I get to the end is take a look at my timer. And if I have time left and I feel like I can maybe answer that question effectively, if I put a little bit more time into it, then yeah, I'll go back to it. If I've already used up my time for that passage or for that game, then I'm going to go on to the next one and just not worry about it. Maybe if I have extra time at the end, I will. So Ariel, excellent question. All right, folks. Well, I hope this was helpful. I think our hour is about up. So thank you all for being here. For those who are here live, for those of you who are joining us by recording, thank you very much. A couple other things to share quickly before we call it a night. So like I said earlier, if you're interested, if you're trying out different resources and trying to figure out what works best for you, you can go to manhattanprep.com/LSAT/classes and see a list of upcoming classes. You can attend session 1 for free of any of our courses to check it out and see if it's going to work for you. Or just check it out and get some good information. And, you know, if you don't end up taking the full course, we're okay with that. Also, other free options, manhattanprep.com/LSAT/resources. There are links to the Navigator, links to a lot of other good resources that we have available. And so check those out. Again, check out our YouTube channel. We have a lot. We do these free prep hours twice a month, and we post the videos to YouTube. And so there's probably a lot of good information there on our YouTube channel that might help you out. So thanks, everyone, for who's watching the video. And we'll go ahead and call it a night.